Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'm going to review the film Paddington in Peru, and in the second half, I'm going to review the movie Dogman. Starting off with Paddington in Peru, what can I say about Paddington that hasn't already been said? Nothing really. I mean, his movies are just so charming, wonderful, wholesome, and heartfelt. The first movie is very good, but the second is on another level that's just so good. I remember that going into the second one, I wasn't even a huge fan of the first. I thought it was enjoyable enough at the time, but I think I saw it when I was a little too young and immature enough that I didn't fully appreciate the witty humor and that sort of banter that comes with the British kind of comedy. I was just a bit too used to American dumb humor that I just wasn't really prepared for it, I think. I wanted something a bit dumber at the time. So now I look back and question my taste in the whole thing. But it's just both of these movies are really good. After seeing and adoring the second movie, I revisited the first one and found myself loving it a lot more than I remembered. Time definitely went in that movie's favor. I really liked it quite a bit. I think those first two movies are on a really high level. I mean, that second one is just incredible, but the first one is also really good. And I really recommend both of them, checking them out if you haven't seen them already. Just know that they're more witty than your average American comedy, and know that, it's definitely a lot better quality than I think some of the sillier kids movies we're used to over here. But now, several years later, we finally have a third movie. However, it's missing a couple key people who made those first two movies as good as they were. One of those people is Paul King, the writer and director. He went on to do Wonka, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I don't think Wonka is on the same level as either Paddington 1 or Paddington 2, but I did think it still had that charm and quality to it. I just think Paul King's a really awesome filmmaker. I mean, he really just understands how to make a movie that makes you feel like a kid watching it. I think both Paddington and Wonka did that very well. Also not here this time around is Sally Hawkins. She departed as well, which is a shame because she's a fantastic actor. I still say she deserved the Oscar for Best Actress for The Shape of Water. She was really terrific in that. I mean, I love that movie. I love her in it. And she just was awesome in these Paddington movies. It's a shame she's not here this time around. But filling in these two people's roles are Dougal Wilson as a director, and a set of brand new writers as well, and Emily Mortimer fills in for Sally Hawkins, who will likely be the only noticeable difference for a lot of the audience, as she is a big character in the movie, whereas the other changes are all really behind the scenes. But with all that out of the way, how is the movie? It's good. Well, pretty good, I should say. To put it in the same ballpark as the other two, I think would be wrong, but it's sort of like comparing Toy Story 4 to the other three movies. It's still good, but not amazing. I mean, I know some people really don't like Toy Story 4, so maybe don't compare it to that in this case, but I am someone who does enjoy Toy Story 4. I do think it's an enjoyable movie, just not nearly on the same quality as those other two, and that's what I would compare Paddington to as well. Like, I really think it's a good movie, just not nearly as strong as those first two that came before it, which can be disappointing, but you just gotta lower expectations a little bit. But what this movie gets really well, like what this movie does totally right, is the heart. Everything you loved about this character in the other movies is still there. And if you were moved by those other movies, you'll likely be moved here too, as I was. I was also laughing a pretty good amount in this one too. Maybe not as much as the others from memory. Like, I really remember the second one especially, like there were a couple of jokes that had me like dying. This one didn't go that far, but the witty British humor is still there. It's still as charming and clever as it was before. And where I think the movie is noticeably maybe a bit weaker than the other two is in the story. This one is about Paddington traveling with the Browns to Peru in hopes to search for Aunt Lucy, and it's definitely a nice idea on paper. It's pretty good in execution too, but I think that's kind of the thing. I totally understand trying to change the setting of this movie from the UK, because in order to keep things fresh, a change of scenery usually does the trick, and I think that's just a really good method in these types of movies. Like, when you spend a lot of time in one area, the jokes can get kind of old if you just keep repeating them over and over again. I mean, the first two movies were different enough that you didn't really mind. It also had a bit of a change in scenery in where in the UK it was, or what the location, I guess, of the movie really was. I don't want to spoil it in case you haven't seen it. But this movie really just goes completely different location, And I think that's a cool idea. I mean, I think that really, like, just kind of adds a different perspective to things. And in having the first two movies be with Paddington being a fish out of water, and now in this one, relying on the rest of the family to be the fishes out of water is kind of fun. Because Paddington grew up in Peru, that's where he was born, and so he's kind of returning to his home place. But now this family, the Browns, they're from the UK, and they have to go out of their comfort zone and really, on this adventure, and that kind of added a new twist that I thought, honestly, just kind of changed things up enough to be fresh. And there's a good arc for the whole family here, and you get to see Henry Brown in particular try to be the brave one when he's usually very risk averse. So that was entertaining. He gets a lot of very fun scenes, especially one with this sort of spider that was probably the funniest scene in the movie. That was really good. And some new cast members here include Olivia Colman, Antonio Banderas, and Carla Toos. They're all good, but Olivia Colman, she really steals the show. She's awesome. I love her in everything she's in, honestly. I think the first time I ever saw her was the movie The Favorite by Yorgos Lanthimos. I mean, I never heard of her before. She won the Oscar that year, and ever since then, she's just been terrific. She's so charming, so wonderful. Everything she's in, she puts her all into it. And really, she might be my favorite part of the movie. As for the rest of the film, it's pretty fun, if predictable. Like, really predictable. I mean, a few surprises aside, a few little twists here and there, I could basically pinpoint exactly how this movie was gonna go and how things were gonna go down. Like, I could even kind of figure out, like, okay, this over here is gonna be used down here down the line. Like, it's just very obvious a lot of the time. Like, I like foreshadowing a little bit, giving me a little bit of something, but this movie does pretty heavy foreshadowing, and unfortunately, I think it kind of takes away from some of the surprises. It's a little disappointing given that the plot is partly intended as a mystery, like the whole thing is, where's Aunt Lucy? How are we going to find her? What happened to her? And you kind of figure it out very early on, but the few surprises that are there genuinely did come unexpected, at least to me. Like, there were a few things in the third act that I did not see coming, and that kind of helped at least give the movie some more momentum, and I think the third act is easily the best part of the movie to me. Like, it's a lot of fun. I actually kind of thought when I walked out of this movie, I would compare it very heavily to the new Wallace and Gromit movie, Vengeance Most Foul. Both movies have a lot of very similar things. I think both are, like, good, but not quite as good as the earlier things from both Wallace and Gromit and Paddington. They're also both British, so they have very similar types of comedy. And I think in both cases, also, the third act is really where the heart of the movie lies. It's where the best part of it is. I still enjoyed the movie before that, but I think the third act is awesome. And here's the thing, I wouldn't really rave about this movie otherwise or say it's like anything outstanding, but the Paddington movies just continue to be a great standard for family entertainment that both kids and adults can enjoy. You really don't see too many of those these days. Like, The Wild Robot's a really great one for families, and DreamWorks does a lot of that too, as I'll get to in a little bit with my next review, but I think just like this is awesome family entertainment. Everyone can get something out of it. I heard kids laughing in my theater. I was laughing, as an adult, and you can just tell a lot of people were enjoying it. And by the end of the movie, I was even a little bit choked up by what was happening, and whether this movie earned it on its own or it was done as a trilogy, like culminating in everything, I don't really know, but I was satisfied with the way things wrapped up, and again, I really did feel it at the end. So I suppose we'll see what's in store for this bear in the future. I think I just heard a fourth movie is officially in development, so we'll see where that goes. But I'll always be there to see what Paddington's up to. But Paddington's really an awesome character. I love watching him, and I'll be there to see what he's up to next. I'm going to give this movie a B. It's nothing great, really, but it's a fun time, and I would still recommend seeing it. Alright, and now we're moving on to Dogman. Look, I love DreamWorks Animation. They've had a lot of interesting movies over the years, and it feels like they're in a more fascinating place than ever before, with changing their animation styles, telling more mature stories, and finally getting back to some, I think, originals, or at least movies that aren't sequels to something. Because Dogman, similar to Captain Underpants before it, is based on a popular series of books. I haven't read any of these personally. I mean, I have read some Captain Underpants, haven't read Dogman. But I know they have their fan base, and I've heard of the character before. I was actually a little concerned for this movie going in, because one, it came out in January, which I think I've said before is like the dying month for movies of the year. It's like usually when movies just, studios dump out all their worst stuff. This January's actually been really solid, though, I have to say. Like, this past January, Flight Risk aside, I think most of the movies have actually been pretty good, if not very good even, with, like, Companion. And two, DreamWorks only put out one trailer for this movie, which usually isn't a good sign. That means they don't really have a lot of material, you think, and it's just, usually movies put out more than one trailer. The fact that they only put out one just didn't give me a lot of confidence that they had something they were happy with. So that got me a little bit concerned. And for the first 15-20 minutes of this movie, I was actually really enjoying it. Like, surprisingly. It's super chaotic, energetic, crazy, and packed with visual style. As I'll get to soon, maybe a little too much style, but I thought it was just a lot of fun. Like, there's this one action set piece it starts off with. It gets the movie going on a high note, and I thought it was really entertaining. I was having a lot of fun with it. But I thought the sort of stop motion animation look it has, it isn't really stop motion, but it's sort of a look to it that it, like a lot of movies nowadays are trying to do a watercolor look or sort of like this 2D sort of hybrid look that is really 3D. That's what this movie's doing. It's trying to look like stop motion. But I thought that the goofy humor and the general vibe to the whole thing made me feel like a kid watching it. And that's something I really like to compliment on because I just love watching those kinds of movies where I just sit back and I just feel like, just a little kid watching TV. That's just an awesome feeling to have. And I saw someone online say that if Emmett Brikowski, the main character from the Lego Movie, could make his own film, this would be it. And I actually totally agree with that because it just has that kind of energy to it. If you've seen the Lego Movie, you'll know exactly what I mean, but like, he's just like this very happy, everything is awesome kind of guy, and that's what this movie just feels like. This movie just totally captures that feeling of like goofiness, kiddiness, like just that total vibe. I can't even really explain it, but you'll know what I mean if you've seen it. It was also an interesting choice to not have the dog talk beyond barking. It's very rare you'll see that. Maybe like Garfield and Odie would be the only case where like Garfield talks, Odie doesn't talk as a dog. But I think it kind of adds some humor in a way because the fact that like he can't talk just means like he's trying to express himself like through barking or whining or whatever, like dogs do. And it just makes it cute. I mean, he lacks a little bit in the character because of that. I think like comparatively you had the movie Flow come out a few months ago where literally none of the animals talked and it was just no dialogue at all throughout the film. And in Flow, you did actually get to really see a lot through the characters. In this, you get a little bit of that. Dogman doesn't really feel like a very developed character, I'm not going to lie. But, it just adds some humor to it, though. It's kind of cute. And the animal humor in general is very, very nice. If you have a pet, you'll almost certainly smile. I feel like that's a very safe kind of humor. Anyone knows, like, it's like you see a cute animal do something, you'll smile or laugh at it. That's what this movie goes for a lot of the time with its humor. The best jokes are really that kind of humor where it's just cute animal doing something cute. It's entertaining. I mean, I'm not going to complain. I'd prefer that over like potty humor any day. And there is some funny jokes like otherwise. The thing with this movie though is you quickly realize there's not much else going for it besides like the cute jokes and sort of this crazy action going on. It doesn't even feel like there's much of a plot because the film shifts focus as fast as a dog's attention span. Like, I'm not even kidding. This movie moves, like, at crazy speeds, like, the entire time. Like, this is maybe the first movie I've seen where I was like, this thing's not even going on, like, 2 times speed. It's going on, like, 3 times speed because the whole movie's just going so fast and so crazy that you can't keep up with it. And it certainly feels like this movie is made for a dog's attention span, or maybe that's just how kids are these days with, like, TikTok and stuff, because oh my god, this movie just doesn't take a beat to settle down. I always say, like, a good movie really needs to keep the ups and the lows. Like, I think it's a whole separate conversation, really, but I've kind of thought a lot of the time, like, if you ever wonder why, like, an action movie isn't very good, usually it's because, there aren't stakes in the action, or maybe action movies can get numbing because there's just so much action that at some point you're just kind of, like, not even impressed anymore. You're just kind of like, you gotta up the ante, or you gotta do something with the story, otherwise the action just gets very repetitive. And that's kind of how this movie felt a little bit. It just has so much going on at all times, it never takes a minute to just, like, let the characters breathe. Maybe a couple times, but not enough. And it's just nonstop craziness that honestly got exhausting to watch after a while. It also hurts the pacing in a kind of surprising way because this movie is only an hour and a half, but so much is happening that time doesn't feel normal. I felt like this movie was like 2 hours long because I couldn't tell how far we even were in the story. And that's like the weird thing because usually when a movie just kind of moves so fast, it just, the movie just ends, like before you even feel like it begins. In this case, it's sort of the opposite effect because so much is happening that at a certain point, like you're just kind of like, where's the story? Like, it just keeps going. Like, you feel like you're halfway through the movie. It's only like a third in because just so much is happening and there's so many plot lines and you can't follow anything. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I felt like it was a little all over the place. This movie is seriously a lot, and even as someone with like ADHD, I found it to be mentally taxing here. I was just like, by the end of the movie, I was just like, what did I just watch, man? Like, that was crazy. There's a cute subplot, though, with a cat played by Pete Davidson and his son. I thought the exploration of fatherhood and parenting was pretty touching, and at least gave this movie something to focus on in the second half, and something for me to, at least as a viewer, to kind of like really, just get invested in besides the cute, kitty dog humor and stuff like that. But on a bit of a weird note, Dogman is oddly kind of a supporting character in his own movie. Like, I'd say Petey the cat is the real lead character, and Dogman just kind of plays a part in his story. It's a little weird, but that's just what it is. Honestly, though, the Petey the cat stuff was probably the best part of the movie, so that's kind of fine. But as a whole, I thought this movie was a mixed bag. When it works, it's actually a lot of fun, and it has good creativity. I appreciate a lot of that. It really just goes for these visual gags and jokes, which is something my favorite show, The Simpsons, uses quite often. It'll give this movie rewatch value too, I'm sure, because you'll notice new jokes you missed the first time. And that's kind of cool. That's very fun. I appreciate that the filmmakers really tried to put a lot into the visual animation medium. And it's decently made. You can tell the people involved were trying to make something fun, and I think kids will enjoy it. Kids will definitely have a fun time watching it. Parents, on the other hand, some of you may find enjoyment to be had, but you also may find yourself with a bit of a headache by the end like me. I had fun with parts of it, but at others I was just like, oh my god, I can't take much more of this, honestly. Like, this is so much. Even Boss Baby 2, like, that was another movie DreamWorks made that I thought was, like, ridiculously energetic, and that movie I think at least kind of grounded itself at points that I could follow it and get more into it as it went on. This movie just never calms down, so it was a bit much. And it's not a bad film by any stretch of the imagination, but unfortunately, I can't see myself wanting to revisit it, even though, like, I'm sure there will be enjoyment to be had in a rewatch. It just felt too long and all over the place to me. Even with some cute moments and fun action sequences, I just wasn't really able to fully get into it or even say, like, I really enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed parts of it for sure, but just not as a whole. So I don't know, I'm going to give it a C+. It's not bad, I just really was hoping I'd like this better. If you do see it in theaters, though, there's a fun short for The Bad Guys, a film from a few years ago that I enjoyed, and the sequel is coming out later this summer. The short was only like 5 minutes long, but it was entertaining, and it was great to see these characters again. That's one of DreamWorks' other movies that they made recently, and the sequel looks like a lot of fun. I'm hoping that'll be good. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd and MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve the show. And, of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.